wonder how kids go from this to this? Well, with children spending 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in our public schools, the decades-long cultural Marxist, rabid leftist takeover of our education system might have something to do with it. You know, Vladimir Lenin is quoted to have said, "Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seeds I have sown will never be uprooted." So, what kind of seeds are being sown in our kids' malleable minds today? Canadian Communities, Past and Present is a textbook designed for Ontario grade 6 social studies classrooms. Now, as you leaf through it, you come across all the usual globalist, crypto-Marxist mumbo-jumbo about motifs like global communities and global citizenship. The textbook discusses things like immigration and war as it relates to Canada and the world. And then there's this part about child soldiers. It starts off rather innocuously and objectively, describing the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child, which forbids children under the age of 15 from armed conflict, and then begins to name countries in which child soldiers have been used in armed conflicts: Afghanistan, Colombia, Iraq, Israel, Libya, Mali, and Yemen. Sorry, what? Israel? Israel? Home of the Israeli Defense Force, one of the most publicly profiled, best funded, and well-outfitted armies in the world, Israel, where military service is actually mandatory. There's what? A shortage of armed soldiers, so they're dipping into kitties to fight the wars against Islamic terrorism from all sides? Yeah, sorry, but that simply and categorically is untrue. The IDF, unlike the other nations on that list, has very clear and inviolable age restrictions. Israeli men and women alike are eligible for enlisting only after they've turned 18 years old, a standard age for military enlistment when considered on the world stage among civilized nations. There's not a single credible story that exists anywhere about the IDF ever recruiting or using child soldiers in any instance since the formation of the nation-state of Israel. On the other hand, Israel's enemies, well, they use child soldiers all the time, and it's very well documented. Just this past winter, for instance, the Gaza-based terror group Hamas, well, they proudly showed off the future of Hamas in a series of really chilling shots of children bearing arms, a sort of echo of the ISIS cubs of the Caliphate photo shoot. And it's not just a photo op in Gaza. They have terror summer camps for child soldiers where Gazan youngsters participate in military drills and weapons training, including rockets, the sort of rockets that are infamously fired in nearby Israeli towns where over 50% of the population currently live with post-traumatic stress disorder. And, well, what about the West Bank? Well, according to the Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group, in the Al-Aqsa Intifada, children were used as the messengers and couriers, and in some cases, as the fighters and suicide bombers in attacks on Israeli soldiers and civilians. And while Israel's Islamist enemies train children to fire on the Middle East's only democracy, well, the IDF is actually treating over 1,500 injured Syrians from that nation's war as the Arab world just turns a blind eye. And while Canadian curriculum paints Israel's army as the sort of immoral monsters who recruit children, the truth is they use some of the most moral military tactics witnessed anywhere in the modern world, including phone calls to civilians in enemy territories before strikes, and roof knockers, a small warning rocket usually sent from drones to tell people which building is about to be targeted and to give them time to get out. This grade 6 course textbook isn't rooted in facts. It uses the same tactics of lies and conspiracy theories practiced by, say, the Palestinian Authority to stoke hatred against Israel. It's not educational material, it's indoctrinal. And yet that lie is being taught as gospel to thousands of young Canadians, because this text is not just in a few classrooms, it's actually on the province's Trillium list, the apparent gold standard for classroom reading materials, in which textbooks have been subjected to a rigorous evaluation. Yeah, only one problem though. That evaluation has to meet a certain policy document, and that document has a certain standard when it comes to bias. It states that any content must be free from racial, ethnocultural, religious, regional bias, and bias by omission. Now, considering this elementary school text falsely claims Israel uses child soldiers, a flat out lie, while omitting to mention her neighbors who actually do utilize children in war, if you ask me, this text does not meet the guideline necessary to remain on that trillium list. And at a time when all our nation's leaders are tripping over themselves to disavow of so-called Islamophobia, well, perhaps in light of this biased and false anti-Israel propaganda that's being used in our schools, yeah, perhaps now would be a good time to disavow of this case of systemic anti-Semitism. And I'm serious about it. I want the province to take this book out of our children's classrooms in this province until Nelson Education Ltd, the publishers of this book, amend the respective section. And so, I'm starting a petition. If you want to ensure children are taught facts, not bias and bigotry, go to stoptheindoctrination.com. Because whether issued by ignorance or malice, this sort of blatant indoctrination should not have any place in our taxpayer-funded school meant for education of our young. For the Rebel.media, I'm Faith Goldie. To have your voice heard, go to stoptheindoctrination.com.